So I always like to create a little bit of background for the modules we're going to do, help you to give some context to it, perspective. The evolution of this module. At first, I started, the whole goal here was to introduce this idea of creating traditional details in our architecture. Um, that means basically in our software tool is the understanding of how to create profiles and then sweep them out onto our forms. And the first project I started with was a townhouse. Um, and I have some reasons for connecting both traditional details and townhouses together. Um, and that I'll try to kind of connect here in a little bit. But I was really unhappy with the appearance of the building that I'd come up with. I'm really not very good at it as a designer, and I kind of struggled with this. I was a little bit disappointed with it. I thought about trying to create it more as a modern thing, creating some kind of other interest. One of the underlying themes here was always this idea of being able to use these repeating modules, showing you how to copy and paste, expand out your building in these repeat patterns at the same time, because that's a common element of what happens in some of this traditional kind of townhouse development. But I really kind of rejected that because it was really away from the idea of anything about traditional details. And one of the things that I stumbled on was in a local publication, a project that was being proposed by a local architect of townhouses. And I thought this was a really a great project. It had a lot of high quality materiality in it. We didn't have siding on the building now. It was brick. It had a lot of the kind of simple or ornamentation that I thought would give us a lot of learning experiences. And it really did some nice development of the site. So I thought this was a really good project for me to look at how I would model this and figure out how to model it quickly so that we could do it within one module in our 3-hour allotment of time. I think it's important to kind of give you a little background about how this project evolved. This connection between actually modernism and, as I said, I'd gotten off track by thinking up modern ideas about the way I wanted the townhouse to look, and moved away from traditional details. And so part of the storyline here is that in order for them to arrive at this more traditional looking building, and the traditional details here are really subtle. I mean, the bump outs, the way the bump outs have the trim on them, but also these little peaks hinting at pitched roofs, this kind of ornamentation of the brackets down here, all trying to create a sense of a historic fabric to the neighborhood that they were fitting into. And that was an evolution because actually down here on the right-hand side at the bottom, we have one of the first proposals of this. So this was a very modern building, and it was quickly rejected because there was off-street parking, or garage doors on the face. And this was rejected because the community felt really strongly that we needed to activate. We have a sophisticated urban neighborhood in the city of Buffalo, and especially in this is a historic neighborhood near Kleinhans Music Hall, a Sarian landmark. And so this was quickly rejected, not activating the street, no porches. Other versions of it added now, pushed the parking to the back of the building and created these porches. And there were still rejections about it not feeling, warm or having enough character to it. I think there were versions here. This was a pretty sad attempt at landscaping. This is probably an intermediate one. A little more sophistication in the concept of landscaping. This one here on the right. But they were still not being completely accepted. So eventually they ended up with this one that was accepted by the community and permitted by preservation. And it's the one that I've tried to figure out the best way for us to actually build a model to fit into our time slot. And this gives us a lot of opportunities to create building sweeps, trims around the building. In these cases, they're not very ornate, but they help you to develop the idea of the techniques for creating these. Some ideas of being able to modify windows to get window mullions to align properly. And then a chance to build outdoor things like sweeps along the capping of the stone, what'll be a water table along here, to develop this kind of site building context. So there's all the trim things, and then there's this other overlay of this concept of it being a townhouse. And I think it's important to focus on what we're actually building as far as a housing type. It's a strong component of what architects are doing in cities to build density. The idea that units are in infill lots, typically in cities, developed cities like Buffalo and Syracuse, actually just all over the country. There are pockets within the city where properties have deteriorated, and the concept of infilling with higher density, higher quality architectural projects becomes a staple of many architectural firms. So so on this idea of the building typology, we have this is actually an apartment, but very similar to what a townhouse would be. The idea here is urbanity. Houses are close to the sidewalks, or buildings are close to the sidewalks. The porches are small and fronting on the street facade. It's where the focus of the activity and urban life happens. And you'll notice in the front elevation of this one, you can actually start to see the repeats in the patterning. So we have a mirroring of the units from left to right, and then it looks like probably 2 units in the center, probably sharing some of these window components with other units adjacent to it. And here's another view of that. And actually, this is probably this unit right here that was built. They'll probably expand or drop back a little bit. And I showed you, I guess, one of the ideas of urban infill is here's an aerial shot of that. And here's a large area where a shopping plaza used to exist in a really dense residential neighborhood on the Buffalo's east side. And it was a perfect opportunity to introduce new housing stock here. And so here's that kind of build out. I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of the layouts of the rooms, because with townhouses, just to touch on this, really it's not to be about townhouse topology or this kind of living units, but we will make as architects a lot of this and design a lot of it. And one of the things is this idea that we very many times, because units are butted against each other, there's very little opportunity to introduce windows on the sides of the buildings. So all of our windows and glazing systems have to have either exposure to the back or the front side, and that really specifically drives the kind of arrangement of spaces. For instance, bedrooms, living rooms have access to windows. Sometimes bathrooms don't have access to windows. The same thing with kitchens, may not have a window on them because it's abutting another unit or townhouse next to it. So this typology is really what's going on in our building types. And this is nothing new. This is on Pearl Street. These are, I think they're called the Pearl Street carriage houses or something like that. It's built probably in the late 1800s. But we can also see this common concept carried through again. We have, and maybe these are like the local architecture firm took some of these concepts to carry forward into their development. In this case, obviously the close relationship to the street, to the sidewalk, the front porches, the bump outs on the second floor to create a little sense of character or visual interest on the building. And you can also see the repeat or patterning of these buildings. So we have this first module is then repeated every other one going all the way through the building. So this last one is actually the same as the middle one and the end one, except for the change in brick. But enough variation to create an interesting layout of the facade. And these also can be disguised in things that almost appear to be single detached, which is one of the proposed examples in our city that was recently built. I'll pick up on another clip about trim details